Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh. Look at you. Look at you. Wow, you see? Wow. Wow. Wow.
We're the losing team.
But we have a strong sense of community.
We don't come for community, Rabbi Zemel.
Yes, I've heard that.
Yeah.
We come for the humor. That is, hang on a second. Yeah, right. Yours is newer. Okay, fan. Oh. Can someone take a photo of this with their phone, please? We all need, yes. Should we, yeah.
I think we
Let
should
us
be
know.
In our asking for Shir. Okay, nice.
Okay. Fantastic.
Yay, okay, love it. At the end.
This is fantastic.
Oh, we're done, I think. Great.
I can just say,
microphone for
I
them?
can just say one thing. Who needs a celebration committee? This is
Oh, there should be a microphone for that.
okay.
The microphone for questions is on the seat of the drum set.
Great.
Okay. So is there a first question? Oh, Marcus. Okay.
Hold on 1 second, though.
Oh.
Let me pass this. Sure. Just pass it around.
Hi, does this work? It's working. You can hear me. Okay. So, hi. I have this is questions for you, Danny. I loved your sermon last night. It is why I joined Temple Micah in the first place. I had two questions for you about it, though. Not though. I have two questions for about it. Period. The first one is. Has Hebrew Union College changed its curriculum in any way since the time you were there?
Slightly.
And someone else can answer that, that's fine. And the second one is for you. I'd like to know, when did you decide and how did you decide to move from conservative to Reform Judaism?
That's a good question. So you guys want to talk about how the curriculum, as you answer Marcus's question about has the curriculum changed, just Rabbi Slakman, you were ordained in 2023, and Josh, when were you ordained?
2014.
Okay, so here we have a 9-year span, 2014 to 2023, really recent. So we have the last 10 years, and they can talk about how the curriculum is different than it was when I finished in 1979.
Well, I'll say that there's.
What's that? Yes. Specifically addressing the things that I mentioned last night.
I'll say that there's still no synagogue studies. The only way that you have an opportunity to think about the future of synagogues, what is a synagogue, is to apply for the Tisch Fellowship and to be able to study with Larry Hoffman. He has had to work outside of the system in order to create this, but we were all lucky enough to be Tisch Fellows, and what Rabbi Hoffman does with us is talks about the synagogue. So that's still missing.
What about anything about classes in Reform Jewish theology, Reform Jewish history?
I took a class called the History of Reform Judaism. That's one class that it seems is now offered that wasn't offered before. You guys took that class too? And there's classes, called integrative seminar, where the classes that are the purpose of the class is to integrate the different things that we've learned into like how it actually, what it actually means to be a rabbi and how the skills are useful. I didn't think the class did that. So there is a class, but to me the integrative part has not been relevant in working in the synagogue world.
They are trying. I think there's a huge curricular review happening right now that I think is trying to be more responsive to at least the Judaism of 30 years ago.
I was was it 2 years ago? I guess 2 years ago now, I was part of the curricular review think tank that was for 3 days in Cincinnati. I don't want to go into length about this, but this is what I'll say. The vast majority of the faculty of the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion are outstanding scholars in their academic fields of Judaism, okay? Talmud, history, theology. It can be ancient history, it can be modern history, okay? You know, Bible, okay? So, in my opinion, every single one of those, in my opinion, every single class, in order to train rabbis, a rabbi is not studying to get a PhD in Talmud. A Reform rabbi is not studying to get it, but no American rabbi is studying to get a graduate degree specifically in Talmud, or a graduate degree specifically in Midrash, or a graduate degree specifically in liturgy. Okay, so the translation from Talmud to the lived Jewish life is something that is not of a primary concern to any of the people that are on the faculty of the Hebrew Union College. That's why I've said several times that I believe every course at the Hebrew Union College should be team taught by someone who was on the faculty, who has a PhD in Talmud, and someone else, whether a professor from a law school, okay? And the someone else should be someone who's an active Jew in the community, who has a discipline in the related field, who can draw out of the professor to begin to create the culture of trying to think about the things of what I kind of did on my own. And after 4 years out, I decided I walked into Larry Hoffman's office at an alumni retreat at the Hebrew College in 1984, at the end of my first year here. And I said, the whole system of post-rabbinical school education is pretty much non-existent, because if you read Durkheim by yourself, you don't understand it. Anything that's important to read, you need to be digesting with a group of people, and that's how we created what we called the Larry Hoffman Study Group, where a group of rabbis who are ordained in a 4-year window, kind of when I was ordained, we kind of, and I'll just be a snob here, we picked out the best and the brightest, Larry and I. Who are the 12 people who we would want to sit with, who you'd want to sit with? And I was going to New York in those days 3 or 4 times a year. He would, and it was fantastic. And at some point, I can go into more detail about the curriculum that we as a group developed together, because we knew we needed to learn different ways of reading a text. And that's enough. Now, how I went from conservative to reform, that one's easy. I'm a senior in college. I'm applying to the Jewish Theological Seminary to go to rabbinical school. I apply to the Jewish Theological Seminary to go to rabbinical school. I get accepted to the Jewish Theological Seminary to go to rabbinical school. I'm talking real fast. And then I go there for a weekend, and behold, I'm introduced to Orthodox Judaism. Okay? The Jewish Theological Seminary, the flagship institution of conservative Judaism that I had grown up learning about, okay? I'm graduating college in 1974. I entered college in 1970. The college campus was a hotbed of all kinds of things. Brown, for the first time, was introducing co-ed dorms, all kinds of things. And this was the 70s. Okay, at JTS, you had to live in the dorm. You couldn't live off campus. Whereby at Brown, by the time you were a sophomore, you could get a waiver, live off campus, get an apartment. You had to live on campus. You had to live in the dorm. You had to sign a pledge that you would observe Jewish halakha the way they ordered it at the seminary. And the synagogue there still had a mechitza. Men and women did not pray together. In the conservative movement flagship educational institution, I was there for a weekend, and I said to them, this nice dean, Rabbi Baruch Feldstern, I don't think I can come to rabbinical school here. I thought I was raised as a conservative Jew. Little did I know that looking at Abraham Lincoln while I was praying was something really bizarre. For me, that was kind of normal. And so I said, I don't think I can go to rabbinical school. And he, to his credit, said, well, maybe you want to try the Hebrew Union College. I thought the Hebrew Union College was in Cincinnati. He gave me a subway map. He told me where I could go get the subway, and I got on the subway down to the Hebrew College. And at some point, I'll tell you the rest of the story because that also is interesting and relates to Grandpa Goldman.
So you talked, all of you have at various times talked about how you read the text. And you spent last night's sermon dealt with how the text is in many ways not, in some of the liturgical text doesn't resonate with modern Judaism, or one has to make a leap in one's head. So the text that we read at the high holidays that always is troubling for me is Avinu Malkeinu. The Malkeinu part in particular gives me hives. And I would wonder, whoever of you wants to respond, what do you say in your head? It used to be you said, our Father, our King. We don't do that now. We pretty it up by keeping it in Hebrew, so we're not really saying it. But that's still saying it. What do you say in your heads? Because I trip over those words every single high holiday.
Rabbi Beraha and I have talked a lot about this over the past few years as we create the other service. And because what you said really resonates a lot with me. And Melech, King, is all over, not just Avinu Malkeinu, but like all of our prayers. And I'll just say, most of the time, I have enough in my head that Melech is actually gender neutral, because I truly, deeply, deeply, with everything I have, believe that God is beyond gender, and that our language is imperfect. And I try to think about it a little bit, like every week. And then actually where I am, and I don't know how I'll feel in another 5 years or 10 years, but where I am now this is the time of year that I actually want a king. This is the only time. Or maybe a queen, maybe both, but I also understand that this sort of is a kind of unsatisfying answer, so.
Well, what I want to offer is the power of if we look at where these prayers came from, and even our ability to call God King, and especially like a phrase that you'll see like in Aleinu, Melech Malchei HaMelechim, the King of Kings, that actually our use of the word Melech, as I understand it, is about saying we don't like. Whatever's happening here, like whatever politician is leading us right now, we're part of something bigger. And the need of a king is actually saying, like, I need to call you, like, if I'm in the brain of the people who wrote these, I need to call you king because that's the most powerful thing I can think of. And I want to say, you're not my king. I've got another king. I'm part of something that's bigger, that's more powerful, that's more special. And so you, however you choose to like abuse me or define me, I'm not going to let you. Like that's what I'm thinking about when I particularly Avinu Malkeinu is about saying like there are people right now who are in power, who are seeking power, who are trying to define our terms, and I want to be part of something else. And that's what I'm thinking about.
And I'm going to add two more answers. I think one of the uses of religion and religious texts are to provoke us. Like, there are so many texts in the high holidays that provoke me so deeply. Unatana tokef, uchuva, tfilat, tzedakah. You do these three things and somehow God's harsh decree is going to be lessened. Like, to me, that's extremely provocative in a super negative way. And I think it's useful to be provoked. I think that's one of the jobs of religion is to provoke us and to sort of sit in that provocation and that discomfort and explore and wonder in it. Also, someone said to me recently, I love that I don't speak Hebrew when I go to synagogue because I don't have to have to know what all that horrible stuff means, and I can just sing the songs. I love that I don't remember any Hebrew from Hebrew school. So, I mean, I actually think that's sort of beautiful in the way that, like, you know, like sometimes we repeat mantras, and sometimes mantras are words that are meaningful to us, and sometimes they're just sounds. So if the provocation is not useful, I don't know, the melodies, like for me, I don't even really think about Avinu Malkeinu. I think that melody is like a motif of the holidays. Like, how awesome is it to lean into that motif, and you can pretend that you don't know what it means, if that's useful. But if it's useful to be provoked, then sit with that, I think.
Okay. I'll add one piece, which is on the Avinu and not the Malkeinu, because that often actually is, at least when I hear from folks, the idea of calling God a father is really hard. The gender piece of it, but also people have complicated relationships with their parents, and that God in not being a human, and if we look at the lists of things that we're asking for in Avinu Malkeinu, it's essentially saying, like, I'm existing in this universe where I thought that I was supposed to be protected in the way that a parent is supposed to protect a child, and I'm really upset that I'm not being protected. And so I'm actually like, so we can, in a way that I don't think any of us, even if we had the best parents in the world, could actually go to them and say, like, why didn't you do this? Why aren't you protecting me? Why aren't you keeping me, like, why didn't you keep me from heartbreak? Because that's not how it works. But we can throw all of that sort of on God, and God can hold that as a parent if we sort of replace that word in a way that almost sort of helps us, like, reparent ourselves, or just have a container for that pain of really what it means to have been birthed.
I also think, Gail, I think our native language is intimately connected to the wiring of our brains. Intimately. So I think if we were in Israel and you'd ask that question in Hebrew to a group of Israeli rabbis, the conversation would be totally different. And so the question is also about praying in ways that are very intimately detailed with the fact that it's a Hebrew text. It's how you relate to a foreign language, and then what you do with the entire burden of translating from a language that is a gender-biased language to ours. But if you ask any Israeli, the word ish means person. Okay? And so ish also means man, as isha means woman, but ish means person. And so you've asked a very complicated question that I think it will have an American answer, a British answer, which would be similar to the American, but a different answer if you're in Israel.
Going to give the microphone to the person who will ask the most difficult question of the day, I'm sure.
Probably not this time, but now I have actually two questions. One's for any and all of you. As someone who's sometimes a bull in a china shop, I'm wondering, after all these years of problems with the training, why hasn't there been a revolt against the college and against the people who run it? Why haven't Reform rabbis gotten together and said, this is not acceptable, we're losing people, we need to train people better so that we can do what you do? Why hasn't that happened? That's the first one. And secondly, Rabbi Zemel, I was wondering last night, I was fascinated with your sermon and all of it, but especially that part, and it's kind of in the middle where you were talking about tradition and about what we do in the synagogue, where we take this story that we know isn't true, and we take all of this that we respect as a fiction because of its values and what it says to us about our lives, and we go out and have to use that fiction in the world in a real way. So I thought that was really fascinating, and if you wanted to talk about a little more, I would like to hear it, but if you don't, then the question is, what did you leave out of that speech that you wanted to put in?
Oh my God.
And we only have like another 45 minutes. Okay. So those are my questions.
I want to take a shot at the first question, because it's something. The answer to that question, I strongly believe, needs to come from the laity, Rabbis are educated the way they're educated. What we need is a national group of lay leaders to go to the institutions, not of the Reform movement, and say, we need better rabbis. We simply need better rabbis. And you need to, and it's going to cost money, and we'll have to raise the money, but we simply need better rabbis. I am totally with you. I am totally with you, but rabbis do what they know how to do. We do what we know how to do, and but if we want synagogues to be great, if we want our Judaism to be more vibrant, the demand has to come from a term I hate to use, I'll use a term I like to use, the Jews, the people. Yeah, that's my answer. Yes. What's that?
For once, we need a committee.
Yeah. This would be, yeah. But it's and it would be labor intensive. And this creates a very, very, very long conversation. Because I said it last night, I think there's really limited imagination in terms of what a synagogue should be about. I think there's limited expectation of I hate to say this, of what a rabbi is supposed to be. One of the reasons, listen, I'm only here for 8 more months. I can say anything I want. You take 8 months to organize a committee to get rid of me. I'll be out the door. One of the reasons I knew I could not stay living in Minnesota as a rabbi was because I realized, I got there, I was 26 years old as a rabbi. Within a year, I realized I was one of the 10 most educated Jews in the state of Minnesota. It drove me crazy. I mean, it was, there was a small study group that studied Talmud at the University of Minnesota Hillel, and I was invited into it. There were 4 other people there, the Hillel rabbi, 3 faculty would drop in and out, and I will say this. I feel very lucky that I ended up at Micah, because within 5 minutes of walking in here, I realized everybody in the room was smarter than I was. Okay, and I had to figure out something that I can know something about also. In terms of last night's sermon, it was. I think the question you asked is the hardest part. The ambiance is everything. And I don't want to talk for a long time, but I remember I read Suzanne Langer a long time ago. I think her book is maybe Art in a New Key or something. I forgot what it is, but you step into a picture. And you're enveloped by the picture, but you can ask yourself the same thing. I mean, I ask myself the same thing. Sometimes I will say, I don't read much fiction, and so I'm not good at reading fiction. And I realize I'm not really good at reading fiction because I live with someone who reads really sophisticated, great fiction all of the time. But sometimes I'm reading a work of fiction, and I say to Louise, I have to put it down. This character scares me. And I can't go into the next chapter yet. I have to kind of just be away from it a little bit, okay? This is an example of stepping into art, okay? And it happens all the time. Why do we sometimes scream when we're watching a stupid television show? Because we stepped into the art, it becomes part of us, okay? Prayer is an art form, okay? Read Larry Hoffman's book, The Art of Public Prayer. Now, he doesn't go into this, but because the book is interested in a different part, but prayer is an art form. During COVID, when we would talk, and we talked to you because you were with us for summer of COVID, when we would talk through computer screens to each other when we weren't with everybody, planning things, how are we going to keep Temple Mike alive during COVID, okay? I would say, We have 172 computers on Friday night. We have 230 computers on Friday night. Big deal. Once we're back live again and the Kennedy Center is open, being a metaphor for the rest of the world, we're going to be back to what we are. Right now, we're the only show in town, literally, okay? We weren't in town, but we're on the computer at a reliable time. We started at about 6:30 every evening, okay? And so the volume grew up, okay? Once we're back, we're going to be back to, to my 40 best friends in the sanctuary on Friday evening. That's just the way it is because we can't compete with the Kennedy Center, okay? Because when I say we can't compete with the Kennedy Center has the resources. Again, the Kennedy Center being a metaphor, whether it's Broadway, any theater, whatever, they have the resources to create the ambiance that is necessary for prayer. It takes huge resources to create the ambiance which will seduce people. I want to come, I want to be here, and once I'm in here, it's working. It's working. And you don't even realize it's working, okay? It's huge. Rabbi Slakman says to me a year ago, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, we can make music that's better than the Kennedy Center. Voila. Then to take the deep thing, the deep truth that comes through the poetry of the prayer book, Matira Surim, set free those who are bound, free the captives. Of course, now, when I read the New York Times every morning, what's going on with those captives in Gaza? Okay? Clothe the naked? Of course we're going to do Underwear Month. Every month should be of course we're going to have Micah House. That's what I mean. When the ambiance, the poetry, and then you walk out on the street and you have to be transformed, okay? And it works to a certain extent, and it's drip by drip by drip by drip by drip, okay? And most people come to services on Yom Kippur, and we'll see them again next Rosh Hashanah, and so they're not getting the drip, drip, drip effect. And so that's why, we didn't think about being warm and welcoming. We want to be warm and welcoming, but it's not even, it's a tertiary thought. We want to figure out how to be Jews, and how to be Jews in a way that's demanding and important. And then how to get that message across. And the ambiance is so, so, so important, because otherwise people are not seduced into listening, because everybody's overeducated. Everybody's gone to either the University of Michigan or Harvard. We've all spent too much time in either Madison, Wisconsin, or New Haven, and therefore we have this very strong button of cynicism or of doubt or of dubiousness. And I'll tell you, we talk about it. On a Shabbat morning when there's a bar mitzvah and the guests are there, we can see it on their faces. What are you going to show me? What have you got for me this morning? I'm here for this thing. You can just see it. You can just see it. You can feel it sometimes. That's my answer. That's my answer.
Well, thank you for bringing up the issue of music again. I mean, excuse me. Rabbi Slakman, we're at a new level with you, and I know it's a joint effort with the band, with the musicians, et cetera, but you brought us to a new level. Kennedy Center, I think they have a lot to worry about. My question is this: you can't operate in a vacuum. You've got 5 other people to deal with, 4 other people on the panel with you today. When you go to set up what you're going to be doing for a given program, how involved are all the rabbis, and what are you guys looking for on a given prayer from the music? What kind of feedback do you want to give Rabbi Slakman? What are you looking for a given prayer for the music? Thank you.
Well, we talk a lot. we sit in a room and talk. For every Shabbat service, for every hour-long service, there's multiple hour conversations for each service. So there's very little things happening in a vacuum on the Temple Micah sort of worship team. But it sounds like the question was actually directed to my colleagues and not me. So. What?
It's a conversation.
It's really an ongoing conversation.
You just said something. You just said something not in the mic, so I'll just say it's really an ongoing conversation. And I think in many ways we talk a lot about prayer as an art form, and I do feel like creating a prayer service is an artistic process, and that it's responsive. There's something happens, and then a little something else happens, and then a little something else happens, and then you realize what you're actually doing. You know what I mean? And then you realize that actually now it's wrong. And so I think that everyone sort of interacts with that. We all are interacting with that process. I mean, it's sort of, I don't know if it's a useful question to answer, like to what extent, like in the end, do I make the final call about something? I don't know. Like it's really a collaboration, and I think it's an artistic process. And I think the more that we can make it an artistic process and a collaborative artistic process, the better the worship experience will be. And often these things are so abstract. That's another part of it. Like what makes something truly successful when it comes to sort of worship or when it comes to art? What makes an art piece successful or evocative? It is so abstract. And that's the beauty of working on it in a collaborative process, and also the difficulty too, because sometimes, abstraction in worship and art is amazing and complicated. Yeah.
Good, I guess it's afternoon. These are two questions from Micah, who wanted to ask, is God real? And Rabbi Zemel, why are you retiring?
That's what we all want to know.
I'll share really just a teaching that I have stolen from Rabbi Zemel, which is that so much of Judaism rests on a single word, which is ke'ilu, which means as if. And so I can't, Mike, I'm sorry, I can't answer the question if God is real. If I knew that for sure, I'd know a lot. But what I can say is that Judaism tells us always that that there are things that we do that require us to act as if God is real. And so the idea that each of us is created in the image of God, it doesn't actually matter if God is real. It matters that we're acting as if each of us is created in the image of God. It doesn't matter if each of us was actually in Egypt. It matters that we act as if we were ourselves brought out of Egypt, and that requires us to have a certain responsibility. So I always think about, I'm just going to accept the premise and say, at least within a certain context, particularly with my relationships with others, I'm going to act as if God is real.
My question is, why do you ask? You don't have to answer. Sorry, that's a hard question. But why? I'm really curious. Why do you ask if God's real? It can be a rhetorical question. We'll talk about it later. But in whether or not, in wondering whether or not God's real, my answer is why? Why do we ask? You know.
I have in hearing like the wisdom of my colleagues, my answer almost feels ridiculous, but for me the answer is yes, of course. And also, God is a metaphor, but God is also real. And we have a great history of believing contradicting things. And for me, my life is possible because I get to be Jewish and believe these contradicting things.
I think the only answers to that question is God real. I loved all these answers. I'm going to give two answers. God is as real as the last time you were inspired. And I also, and I've reached an age where I really know how to repeat myself well. I love the phrase from the William James essay that we need to know something in the universe that throws the last stone. In other words, we simply need a frame of reference. Torture is absolutely wrong. Absolutely. And I can't prove it. I can't make a rational argument why. It's not a matter of pragmatism. So in order to kind of be totally firm on certain things, I have to be able to say to myself, God is real. Now, why am I retiring? Of course, the answer is Ted Williams hit a home run in his last at-bat. And I'll be 72 in November, just less than a month. And I didn't want to overstay my welcome. It's better to be missed in going out hitting a home run than for anybody to say this guy stayed too long, and there'd be uncomfortable conversations, but that I'm not party to. What are we going to do to kind of help him take this and that? I didn't want to get a whiff of any of that I'd lost 1 mile per hour off my fastball. But also, there are other things I want to do, and being a rabbi, for me, being a rabbi is both a joy and a really, really hard job. It's not the kind of job that I could do at half speed. I'm either giving it everything, or I have to step away from it. And that's why I want to be able to control my schedule, control my time. On my last mini sabbatical, I came back twice for funerals, just because when I was on vacation over the summer, I came and did a funeral, and freedom is also enticing, to be totally free of responsibility, and it's not that I won't miss it. I will miss it enormously. I mean, the social life we have in the office on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis, it is an absolutely fun place to be. Our extended staff, I mean, the entire staff, it is such a great group of people. We have the best conversations. So I will miss the day-to-day totally. I'll miss the huge intellectual stimulation with everybody, including especially perhaps the people sitting up here, but not only. But I also think it's 42 years is 2 years longer than Moses had his gig. So it's yeah. So yeah.
Thank you. My question also relates back somewhat to the sermon from last night, which was great, and also to the discussion of music. Rabbi, you brought up yesterday the idea of tradition and traditionalism, and as I sat through the services through these years, 'cause I've been here for a few now, I've noticed that there seemed to be less and less of the kind of the direction that comes through the services on how people are praying, right? The traditions of, say, we're going to stand for this prayer, but we don't say, but we're going to face the door because, or we don't explain the, maybe a little bit of the English explanation of what the prayers that we're about to do are, as a way to bridge the old language that people don't understand and bring it into the new. I came from conservative synagogue, so I learned in Hebrew school. We face the door. It's supposed to be the Sabbath bride coming through, and we turn to face the bride, and we watch her walk this way. Or during this prayer, we're gonna bow, we're gonna stand. Right? We don't really get much of that direction at Micah, and so I see some people kind of looking around, not doing it. And it's unclear if they don't know why people are doing it, or that they ought to do it, or why they ought to do it, or any of that. And that kind of also comes in with, I love the music. I love your voice is so beautiful. Your voices, most of you, and even those of you who don't have beautiful voices, I love hearing you sing. Because I don't have a beautiful voice. The more we can, to me, the more that we can sing with you, even if you bring in some new melodies, but give us a little bit of the old so that people can join in. I feel like that makes it a more, I don't know, inclusive, brings the now.
Looking for the question here.
That brings it out. Why do we do more of the bring the now? Bring the quick explanation of the English. Here's the English explanation of what this prayer is. Then we do the prayer, and et cetera.
I have it's hard to do education and art simultaneously. And the more talking there is explaining something, the more I feel like the art is being reduced. So that is my quick answer for that. And yeah.
Prayer is deeply, deeply personal, I think, for every person who comes into the room. And I think we all have sort of developed a sensitivity around not telling people how they should feel. And I think that sometimes the instructions, at least that I inherited, were very much a direction of like, this is what you should be thinking about when we pray. This is what you should be doing with your body. And I think our goal is to leave it up to the person who's experiencing, to use the metaphor, the art, as opposed to being as directive as we can.
And our prayer book is filled with directions and notes and ways to educate ourselves.
And the singing together piece, I had that thought today. I'm thinking, okay, how are we going to keep elevating this? How is the next iteration going to be more elevated than this one? And I was like, if everyone here was able to let go and lean fully into the prayers that we're doing and the music that we're creating together and sing and pray together, what would that be like? If it was whatever, how many people? There's 900 people in this room doing that. So for me, that thought came today. That's the elevation of it. But also that's you have to do that. You have to let go and lean in and sort of be vulnerable in the way that you pray and the way that you engage with the music. And that's really successful art, is when people are really, they're not just looking, they're drawn in. We're doing our best to draw you in, and I hope that you'll take this as an invitation and an encouragement to consider what that might take for you.
Danny, this is a yes or a no answer. Are you going to write a book when you retire?
You're going to write a book?
I don't know. I don't know if I have anything to write about.
You definitely do.
The answer is, I don't know. I want to take a year just to think and not have any pressure. And then I will come back and think about. I've thought of. I was just talking to, I think, people in my family about it, starting to write, beginning with, I think, what's called the Substack, like a blog. Justice, perfect. So Sam will tell me how to do that. I feel very complimented by the question, and but my answer is I don't know.
I'm going to pass this back.
By the way, Larry Hoffman just said to me something. He's written a lot of books, and he said to me, no one reads the books. No, he was not saying it as a joke at all. He's saying no one reads the books. And then we went through some of the titles of the books that he's written. But beyond the people here, I mean, so that by itself kind of got me thinking when I was talking with him about this. And he wasn't being discouraging. We were having a very, very kind of honest conversation about it.
Okay, well, we're so lucky to have so many rabbis here at Temple Micah. My sister here is from Montana, not originally. She tells me that there's not many people who want to be rabbis anymore. So I wonder if you guys could let me know if that's true and what's going on, what's happening.
Yeah.
So
I just said it's a complicated question. That's what I said. It's a complicated question.
I think this is unformed, but I've been thinking about this for a few years, that service, like choosing careers, choosing a path that's about service is not very popular right now, especially in the Jewish community. We want our children to be successful. We want them to go to good schools. We want them to have jobs that do things. And I question what it looks like to sort of raise children with the idea that what you do is serve. And that looks different for different things. But when I talk to young people, they say like, oh, well, I'm happy to be Jewish, but like I want to do this thing or this thing or this thing. And I think it's important to say there are lots of people who wanted to be active Jews who became rabbis because there was no other path for them to be like smart, educated Jews. And so there, one, has to be a path for that, but two, I just wonder what it looks like to think and talk about service, about dedicating your life to something.
I was going to affirm your question and to say that the numbers are abysmal. If you look at the enrollment at JTS or HUC or any of the rabbinical schools, but this is true for all religion. There are not people. Adam Zemel's shaking his head at me. Hebrew College. The numbers are incredibly low. One thing that I've thought about is that if we are in this period where we are confused about the future of American Judaism, and we're unsure of what it actually means to be a Jew, and we're having all these questions about our identity, I think so we're not really sure what the role of the rabbi is also. So, you say, oh, I want to be a lawyer. Well, that looks like something. I want to be a teacher. That looks like something. When you say, I want to be a rabbi, I think that could be a scary thought to someone because it's not exactly clear what you're going into. So I don't know if people find that motivation. And frankly, they might have grown up with someone who wasn't a role model. You want to be able to sit in a seat and say, I want to be that guy. And not everyone has that experience.
I want to say one thing about your question. I think it's no surprise that there are fewer people that want to be rabbis, because how can you want to be a rabbi if you're not studying the humanities? How can you want to be a rabbi if you're not studying the humanities? And I mean, we call what we do here the human project, okay? And so we are in a period in our culture of, as Rabbi Crawley said, people don't want to do the kind of doing good in the world kind of jobs. We are in this incredibly kind of repressive cultural part, living in I think I got to college freshman week. I took the Hebrew placement exam, and only because of my background, I passed out of 4 years of undergraduate Hebrew. Okay, I somehow knew Hebrew, and so then I'll take these classes. They're kind of, so it was great. But if you're not studying the humanities, if what you're learning to do is code, and I don't even know what that means, but I know everyone's learning coding. For me, coding was Dick Tracy had a coding thing. So I think it begins there. So being a rabbi, and then the other problem is congregations have to think bigly, to use Rabbi Hoffman's term, about what a rabbi is. If the congregation simply wants the rabbi to be a pastor, and there's huge pressure in every congregation to be a pastor, I'll raise my hand. I spend as little time being a pastor as I can, okay? Because you can't have everything. You can't have somebody studying. I've read a lot of books. And I've tried to apply them to Judaism, but no rabbi can do everything, okay? So if the pressure is to turn the job of rabbi more into social worker, that's the kind of rabbis we're going to have, okay? And so, but I think I think it's a multi-pronged thing, but I think so much of it is the humanities. So much of it is the humanities.
We probably have time for
one more question. Two more.
I'm going over here.
have a question. I think it relates to what you have here, but it has to do with the difference between Sephardic and Ashkenaz. I just found out a few weeks ago that Sephardic Machzor does not have Unatana Tokef in it. I found that out because I was reading Rabbi Soloveitchik, who is an Ashkenaz rabbi who became the rabbi of the Portuguese and the Spanish synagogue in New York. And he delineated the difference as Sephardic being joy and hope, and the Ashkenaz fear and trembling, which comes out of Unatana Tokef. And I don't know, I didn't read the whole thing, and I'm not smart enough to really understand it. But one last thing, did I notice a few more Sephardic types of music in the Micah liturgy?
Yeah, I mean, okay. First of all, I don't think that that's a true binary at all. I don't think that Ashkenazi fear and trembling and Sephardic is joy. I mean, last night we sang Lecha Healy to Shukati. It's like, God, my kidneys and my eyeballs and my blood is all yours. Like, it's also sort of morbid and deep, and that could be fear. I mean, the end of it's, what am I and what is my life? You know what I mean? So I don't think but I don't think that dichotomy is accurate.
But I will say Mayor Soloveitchik loves that dichotomy. He's fixated on it.
I think this year we did exactly the same number of piyutim as we did last year. We did 2. Lecha Eli Teshukati on Kol Nidre and Adonis Lichot, which is, something that's sung during the month of Elul. No more. But we added a darbuka. So the songs that we usually sing, the songs that are familiar to us, sound a little bit more Sephardic in the way that they're being played, which I think is something really, really exciting, to sort of fuse the different worlds. We're singing the words, I thank you for my life, body, and soul. Like, that's not what Sephardic Jews are singing.
Sounded different.
Yeah, and the Hashem, so it's like, right, the things that we sing, we can add different textures and different traditions while still sticking with one sort of liturgy predominantly. I mean, that's a really exciting thing about music and art, is we're able to sort of like weave traditions in a way that's a little bit more subtle. So we don't have to replace Unatana Tokef, and we don't have to get rid of Kol Nidre. You can just actually add a darbuka, and that makes it a little bit more Sephardic sounding. And I hope we'll add more. Yeah. And like, what would Yom Kippur be without Kol Nidre, which Sephardic Jews don't do?
Minhag, there's Minhag Sfarad, Minhag Ashkenaz. There's also the emerging Minhag Yisrael. Minhag Yisrael does include Unatana Tokef.
I think it's telling that during Rabbi Zemel's final Ask the Rabbis, we talked about Soloveitchik. And I'm going to let him call.
Soloveitchik. This is Mayor Soloveitchik, the grandnephew of.
It's all relative.
What was that? What you say? It's all relative.
And I'm going to let you pick the final questioner of your final Ask the Rabbis session.
Bessie Roeder, right on the aisle. Oh, sorry.
Because I'm getting the best seat next year. So back to music, which I think the fact that so many of the questions have to do with music speaks to how it has infused our prayer. So my question also goes back to last night's sermon and the interplay between the secular and the sacred, and how we bring sometimes the secular and make it sacred. We return. So suddenly that's become prayerful for me. If I had heard it in another context, it's a song. And I'm just interested in what makes it. Why is it now prayerful? How do we transform this process of transforming the secular into sacred? Is really both puzzling and exciting to me. So I wonder if anybody would like to address that. And thank you so much for this honor.
Okay, so I'm going to say one thing, and then Rabbi Slakman can maybe have the last word. What's that?
I feel like you should have the last word.
No.
Okay, then I'll start. Okay, I'll sort of answer the question. I think that's a really beautiful, really, really complicated, deep question. I just want to sort of say, and so I'm going to answer I'm not going to answer directly. I'm going to say what I want. something really, really exciting, which so many people are aware of, but just to sort of, I mean, this year we hired Philip Mayer to be our artist in residence, and we hired him because he is someone coming from we wanted to hire someone from the secular music world, someone who understands why music touches us in a universal way, what about music touches us in a universal way, to help us imagine our particularly Jewish music context. So that's not, but so I'm like, so that's sort of, that's just to say that this is something we're thinking about, and that's not answering the question. I'll let Rabbi Zemel answer the question. Sorry?
You know, it's all about emotions and what will open you up. And Rabbi Crawley spoke about this in her sermon this morning. What will crack us open? It was a number of years ago at a funeral where we introduced What a Wonderful World. And the funeral was transformed because it was a language, and I don't mean English, it was a language that people understood. So we took a secular musical setting and brought it into the sacred, and so since then, I've begun looking for that in my life. Where in the secular am I sensing the potential for the sacred, and then bringing it in and it becomes something totally different? And I will put that in the service of creating an American Judaism, because we're trying to listen, to feel the fabric, if you will, the cultural, artistic fabric of American culture, and then bring it in to our American Judaism and create then our American Judaism out of emerging of these cloths. That's my sermon last night. So thank you. And Maggie, I'm going to get your question.
Yeah, it's okay.
Sure.
Okay. It probably won't take 3 minutes to answer. Okay, and it's a different direction, but it's been burning me all day, and I want to ask it. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, my question took me all hour to formulate, but I think I have it. As a Jew who loves my Judaism and who is struggling to support the actions and politics of the state of Israel in this current moment, how can I better understand or redefine what the prayer book means when it says Yisrael? How do you define Yisrael when you read it and study it, and how are you navigating that in this current moment?
That's an easy one. Yisrael means one who struggles with God. That's the definition of Yisrael, means one who struggles with God. So it's all in the struggle.
Okay. So rather than a physical place, it's an idea, it's a state of being. Right. A state of being and a struggle with God rather than a physical place, right?
Or Israel is the name of Jacob, and we are Bnei Israel, children of Jacob. So for me, it's not about the state. It's something about much bigger. It's about an a people with a historic tie to a land, but it suggests something much bigger than me, going back to Jacob.
Yeah. Okay.
If you want a really interesting homework assignment,
You can read Rabbi Daniel G. Zemel's rabbinic thesis on the use of Zion in...
but if you want a really interesting, if you want to study the Bible a little bit, go to the chapter, and this is for anybody. This is really, really interesting, the Bible as literature. If I was going to teach a course, I would point this out, but first I would then have to talk to someone that really knows how to analyze literature. But in this story, Jacob wrestles with the angel, and Jacob's name is changed to Israel at the end of the wrestling match. So you have to read the entire thing, and then keep reading all the way through till when Jacob, Israel, dies. Because although his name is changed, both names continue through the rest of the story, and see when in the text they're using the name Jacob and when in the text they're using the name Israel, and you'll discover a lot.
Okay.
That is if you want to do something for the rest of this month, you want to do one really Jewish thing that will open up the world of Jewish study to you, simply do that, and it's really doable. Okay, see you all in 45 minutes.